spanning the entire globe, involving hundreds of different cultures, explaining the same phenomenon by different names.
The nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness, those aspects that are extremely compelling.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Bigfoot Influencers podcast. I'm Dina Halloran.
And I'm Tim Halloran. We're thankful that you're here joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't forget to like and subscribe and to send us a note or a comment during the broadcast. And we're super excited. Who do we have coming on today, Tim?
Well, we have the one and only Chris Spencer.
Yay!
So can't wait to get him in the studio.
Yeah.
And hey, we've been I guess we've had a crazy couple weeks. So thanks for hanging in there with us. We've missed a couple here and there. Weren't able to broadcast a couple episodes, but we had a lot of fun too. We were out and about. We had the Ohio Bigfoot conference, which was amazing.
Yep.
I guess a week or two ago, I was up in New Jersey.
Last weekend.
Last weekend I was up in Perth Amboy, New Jersey at a Cryptid and Paranormal festival, and got to hang out with our friend Dr. Esteban Sarmiento, and I got to hang out with a bunch of cool people. There's Mike Famalot, there's just a bunch of people there, Eric Spinner, and the one and only Ken Gerhard. Yeah, Ken is so cool. First time of meeting him in person, so that was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and unfortunately my knee was messed up, so I had to stay at home on the sofa all weekend, so I didn't get to go, but totally missed out. It
wasn't the same, but it was a good event.
Right.
So look forward to that one next year, and it's close to home, kind of close to home.
Mm-hmm.
And so today we have Chris Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
Chris has been probably 25 or so years. He's still a young guy like us, so
young.
But he's been involved in the subject for a while. He's part of the Olympic project. He's part of Project Zoo Book. He's connected to Dr. Grover Krantz, which we're going to talk about, which is a lot of fun. And then there's something else that you guys got to hang in till the end, and we're going to talk about something else that really exciting and really cool. Maybe one of the first in this community. Something else that Chris is involved in. So I can't tell you yet, but we'll have to let Chris can spill the beans. So hey, you ready to?
I am. I'm ready to bring him on.
All right.
Yep. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, it's good to have you on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good to be on.
Yeah.
Why don't we just get started, and you can tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about yourself outside of the world of Bigfoot. Career, type of music you like, if you have any other hobbies.
Anything you want to share.
Yeah, anything you want to share.
Oh, well, I'm actually a union iron worker. I've been in construction for 24 years now. I worked in fab shops before I joined the union. So I'm mainly a welder, but I do a lot of rigging and everything that entails being an iron worker. So that's what I do. But I'm actually, my other passion besides this subject is fishing. I used to competition bass fish. Now I like going out crappie. I'm kind of addicted to crappie fishing. I still like fishing for bass, but nothing's better than going out on my boat and catching some slabs. So that's cool. If I'm not out in the woods looking for Sasquatch, that's what I'm usually doing. But I have an interest in a lot of things. I'm interested in history. I went to college for history and anthropology. So, you never know what kind of book I'm reading at the moment because my tastes vary and I can be all over the place.
Well, that's super cool. You sound very interesting then.
And you got to come out here, man. There's plenty of fishing here too. So we got water all around us. Mm-hmm. So on the East Coast.
Yeah.
They're calling your name, Chris.
Yeah.
So hey, so you mentioned anthropology and your college career. So I guess you got involved in this subject in 1992. Can you tell the audience how that happened?
Yeah, I don't know that I didn't really get involved in the subject till 2013, but I've been a follower of the subject since I was a little kid. But in '92, spring of '92, I actually took Anthropology 101 at Washington State University, and Grover Krantz was my professor. And at the time, I had no idea that he was connected to the subject at all. But back then, he used to devote one lecture a year to the topic of Sasquatch. And I walked in one morning, and on his counter, he had all the casts, and he had his recreation of Gigantopithecus skull. And basically, he did a whole lecture on everything. He had a copy of the Patterson Gimlin film, which he played on a projector. And what was really kind of profound for me at that time, my dad had always said, "Oh, that's just a guy in a suit." And the only time I'd seen that film was on TV, and it didn't do it justice. And seeing the film actually on a projector in the class and having Grover go over why he believed it was a real creature just completely blew me away. I left that lecture believing, okay, yeah, that's a legit film. And the other thing that was really profound for me is here's an actual scientist, a professor at a major college that believes these things are real, and that just hit me. I was like, wow, there is that. It became something fun to talk about to something serious for me after that. I read his book Big Footprints, which actually came out about the same time, got him to sign it, and I've been following, that really shaped my opinion of the subject. I'm very science based, and everything that I have experienced myself in the field is very primate like. Everything points, in my opinion, to some kind of higher primate. So there's
cool.
that.
Wow,
No,
I mean,
yeah.
how many people can say that Grover Krantz was their professor?
Not many. I think, yeah, because
cool.
Carlos, do you know Carlos Jimenez?
Yeah, I know who you're
Okay.
talking about.
Yeah.
He had Grover too. There's been, there's a number of people out there that knew Grover. I just had him for that one class. I never became like close to him or anything. Back then, I'm kind of an introvert anyway, so there's this whole, my teachers were on a pedestal. They were, I wasn't like I got buddy with them or anything like that, and they were just like guides. They were my teachers. They weren't my friends. So
Right.
if that makes any sense.
That does make sense,
totally.
And that's what hooked me. It wasn't Dr. Grover Krantz, but when I listened to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, I said the same thing. I said, wow, there's a scientist, a legitimate scientist that believes in this, or not believe, because he'll tell you he doesn't believe. So
right.
He said there's something making these footprints. So it's not a belief, it's not faith. But anyway, that's what hooked me too. So that's what got me like scratching my head, saying, wow, that's pretty cool. If these scientists are believe, or into this, that means something's going on. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so just to go back from like 1992 to, you said that you really became involved. Did you say 2003?
2013.
2013 is when you became, so from 1992 to 2013, you were just kind of like a follower of the subject and just kind of reading up on it and listening about it. So was it like a gradual involvement, or did something happen that provoked you to get involved in 2013?
It's funny. I had an odd experience in 2011 while fishing for smallmouth bass on Rife Lake, and here in Washington, Rife Lake, part of the Gifford Pinchot Forest butts up to it, and so the side of the lake that I'd been fishing with one of my friends from my bass club, we'd had something follow us down the bank for about 45 minutes, and it was breaking branches. And he kept saying it was elk, but it was a single animal, and it wasn't moving like elk. And why was it following us? And at the end of that little thing, we'd come to a creek and we're catching fish. And when the fishing died off, we decided to move, and he dropped the big motor, and as he was dropping the big motor, there were, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 power knocks, but there was a power knock. And I had looked at him and he's like, "Oh, what, you think it's Bigfoot?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, you know." And so
And
at
hey,
that
Chris,
point,
just for our newer viewers, can you explain to everybody what a power knock is?
so it's like someone takes a baseball bat and hits a tree harder than, you know, Hercules. So
Gotcha. Thank you.
it'll make you jump.
And you had a motor running then, so you could hear it
No,
over
we had just sat
switching.
down. We were putting our life vests on, and he was trimming the motor down when it happened. But yeah, it was that. After that, I got on the BFRO website, and I actually talked to a BFRO investigator at the time about that experience. And while I was talking with him, you know, that was probably around 2013. I was talking to him about that experience. Me and my son went camping, and we had a more intense experience that just propelled me into, okay, I've got to go out in the woods and look for these things. Basically, I've told it on other podcasts, but we went camping in the spring of 2013. My son was 13, and I had bought him a little Walmart 2-man tent for Christmas, and he really wanted to use it. Well, it was a cold year, wet year, and it was raining on the west side. We live on the west side of Washington, and we decided to jump on Highway 14 and see if we could find better weather. And we got up to the Skamania County campground. It's just a little campground right off of Highway 14, just past the Wind River. And we got there. We were the only people there. It was on April 5th when we got there, and the campground had opened April 1st. It was very thick in there. There's a lot of salmonberry, blackberry, just a lot of vine maple and stuff under the trees, the timber. So it was very thick. And we chose a camping spot that was at the very back, and it was right up against the river. You have basically Highway 14 and then the Columbia River right there. And while there, we'd done a little exploring around, and we'd found an unusual big old track coming up off from the river, and we'd followed that. And then I had found some open freshwater clamshells back in the timber. They weren't chewed on, they weren't like broken or anything. They were just clean and open back in the timber. And I thought that was odd, just because, you know, birds could have taken them back. They're crows, blue jays, and all that. They'll take them back there. But it was just odd where they were, and they were just clean. They hadn't been broken. And we headed back to the camp, and just before we got to where our campsite was, we found a very freshly broken vine maple. It had been twist broke and pushed behind a tree. It was about 6 feet up, and that's nothing big, but vine maple is a strong tree. I mean, and this was 1.5 inches, you know, 2 inches in diameter. I cut it out. I actually have it here, but right underneath that, in the pine needles, or the fir needles, was an 18 by 9 inch impression, and you could see toes in it. And this was fresh. And we were like, holy cow, this is cool. And we started looking around. We actually went back to my Jeep to get one of my tape measures to measure it. And I have old pictures. I just had a flip phone at the time. I have terrible pictures of all this on my other computer. But we end up finding another impression going off trail, same dimensions, 18 by 9. We found there's a lot of smaller fir trees in there, you know, 20 to 30 feet tall. And we found some of them, they were broke off at, you know, 8 to 10 feet up. That's just the tops of them broke off. So it was just odd, but the limb twist and the tracks were impressive to me. And after that, you know, we went fishing and
Which
didn't really
I don't know,
think,
might be that
yeah,
cold,
well,
but
it was in the middle of the day. It was
Right.
nice out. And so we're excited. This is cool. So we went fishing. We came back later, and it did start kind of drizzling. So I had 2 of the small blue tarps that didn't quite cover this tent. This Walmart tent didn't have a rain fly. So I took paracord and I set up these 2 tarps over the top of our tent. And Jameson, my son, went to bed around 9:30. I went to bed shortly after. But I'll say, as it got dark and after he went to bed, I was sitting there in the back of my mind thinking about what we had found just, you know, 50 yards from us. and I was creeped out, and we were the only people there. But anyways, I woke up later that night to heavy movement around the camp, and my first thought was elk, because it was a cold year, and I know the snow level at that time was probably down around 1,000 feet, and so not very far above us. So I thought, well, it might be a herd of elk, because there's behind this campground, there's an actual baseball field, and the elk would go down in that during the winter sometimes. And anyways, it was weird though, because it didn't sound like a herd. It just sounded like something big moving around. At some point, just before I started falling asleep again, something grabbed those tarps and started pulling on them, and I just sat straight up and I cursed. Jameson woke up, and I told him I just had a nightmare, go back to sleep. And then I laid there and I was like, did I hear what I mean, I was like, because I was partially almost asleep when it happened, and I was like, did I really hear that? And just in case, I grabbed the fob for my Jeep, and I laid down, and I was just about convinced that, I'm just hearing things, I'm spooking myself. And then it happened again, and so I hit the panic button on my fob, set off the Jeep and the alarms, and Jameson woke up again. Anyways, he finally went back to sleep, and I just laid there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and on and off all night I would hear movement. And at one point I actually heard splashing down in the water, and nothing ever approached our tent again. But near the end, I want to say it was 3:30 or so, I heard 2 knocks, and they were power knocks, basically, coming from behind us where we'd found those prints in that limb twist. And then I laid there. I don't know how long I laid there till I could see the sky was getting gray. And then I got out of the tent and I built up a fire and waited for Jameson to come out. And I mean, I was scared most of the night, but he got out, and I asked him what he heard that over the night, and he's like, well, I heard you cursing, and then I heard the horn to the Jeep go off, and then I told him what I heard, and he just looked at me and goes, I don't want to stay here again tonight. And I'm like, we're not. And we packed.
Don't worry.
Yeah, because you guys it was supposed to be more than one night, I assume, right?
Yeah, we were going to stay there a couple days, but yeah. So after that, I was like, there's something to this. So
Yeah,
that's
so when you hit your key fob, though, did you hear noise? Did you hear anything running away, or?
No, because the horn was going off on my Jeep and the lights were flashing.
That was so
stuff,
super
but
smart, by the way.
I know.
Yeah, how close was your Jeep to where you guys were sleeping?
maybe 20 feet away.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
That's a great idea.
Advice for you guys listening and watching.
Yeah,
So.
unless you don't want to scare the Sasquatch away, right?
Or
But
any animal. I guess a bear would probably scare a bear or anything else that's out there too.
I think we hear a lot, though, Chris, of people who are out there doing what you're doing, fishing and camping and having a great time, and who are interested in the subject, and even researchers who, once they're actually faced with the knowledge that this gigantic creature could be creeping up on them, that fear overtakes curiosity.
Yeah, I still, I mean, I'm better at it now, but it took me a while to sleep in a tent again, especially by myself. I'm still, because some of the locations we go, we know these guys are at, and it's not unheard of for them to get close to our camps. But over time, I realize that if anything, they're just messing with us. So sleep well. A lot of times I'll take, if I'm really tired and need to get to sleep, I'll take a Benadryl just to knock myself out.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got a question though about that. When you're out with Jameson, so you followed a complete trackway. You said out of the river.
It wasn't really a trackway. There was one impression on the side of the hill. It was really degraded, and then you could see where there was a trail there, and the leaves, there's a lot of leaf matter on the ground, and the leaves were kind of, you could tell something had moved there.
Had gone through there. It was like just any kind of game trail, any. But the clamshells, were they were all stacked together or close by?
They weren't really stacked, but there's quite a few of them just kind of scattered next to the trail in one spot. It wasn't like a huge pile, but there was, 20 or 30, just kind of
Wow.
laying there.
But birds wouldn't put them in the same spot. That's kind of what I'm thinking. It had to
Right.
be something that would be
Carry them
and put them and resting and sitting in one area to eat them. So
yeah. And when you say that they were, broken open clean, do other types of animals open them up not so cleanly?
Yeah, they were just open. They're open and clean. Usually you'll find them broken by the shoreline. Raccoons, like I said, a lot of different birds will pick them up and crack them open, and usually they're damaged. They're not just open and clean.
Gotcha.
Not
Okay.
to say that couldn't happen, but I would expect most animals to break them in some way or another. So
Right.
So I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. So
Mhm.
because I've heard Chris talk about this before. So
Okay.
you mentioned your dad when you talked about he said that he thought the Patterson Gimlin film was just some guy in a suit, right?
mhm.
But when you were younger, you were
Yeah.
out with your dad and you guys came across something a little weird. And that's just that just can you share that? And that's just interesting that you wonder what your dad's take on that was.
Yeah, so my parents had a cabin up in Packwood, Washington growing up, and I spent most of my up until I went to college, I was up at that cabin, either skiing or hunting and fishing. We just lived up there practically, and a lot of hiking and camping. Well, one early spring, dad was cutting wood for the wood stove there, and we'd gone up into the hills above Packwood and getting salvage logs and stuff. And we'd come to a fresh clear cut where you had a perfect view of Packwood down below us. And Packwood's not far from Mount Rainier for those that don't live here. So Packwood's down below us, and Dad had one of those little instant cameras, and he got out and he was taking pictures of Packwood. Well, I had noticed a trackway running up the side of the road, and it was like snow and mud. It was like actually more slush and mud, but it was fairly fresh. And I just got out, and I don't remember exact details, but you could see where something had walked up the road and then went down the side of the clear cut. But the track that I stopped over, it had toes. And I yelled, "Dad!" It's like, "Dad, come here, Bigfoot!" I was telling him there's Bigfoot tracks, and he come over and he looks over. I'm bent down on the ground, and he looks at him and goes, "It's probably a hunter's tracks." And I just told him, "Well, if it's a hunter, he doesn't have shoes on, Dad." And I just looked up at him about that moment. I just remember his eyes were bugging out of his head, and he said, "Get in the truck."
Wow.
And
That's
so
interesting.
yeah, we went back. My little sister was with us too. I must have been I figure about 7 or 8, and my sister was 4 or 5. But anyways, we went back to the cabin, and Dad had gone over to the neighbors, and the neighbors were a retired couple, and the guy was a big hound hunter and all that, or a rock hound hunter. And anyways, Dad went over to talk to him, and he came back, and I was sitting at the wood stove. In front of it, it was like a rocky fireplace, whatever. But I was playing with my plastic army men, and Dad came in, and he's like, "So I talked to Clarence, and if you really want us to, we'll go up there and take a look at those tracks again, if it's bothering you." And I was like, "It doesn't bother me, Dad. It was Bigfoot," but it bothered my dad. That's
Right.
what I remember of that story. So
Wow.
That's pretty
yeah.
wild.
That is pretty wild. That's a crazy. So can you tell the audience, like, how is it and what were you doing when you started getting involved? Like, how did you get involved and what did you do to get involved?
Well, I did what everybody else does. I listened to a bunch of podcasts, and at the time, Shane had 2 podcasts going, and I really liked what Shane had to say. And then David Ellis had talked a couple times on these podcasts, and David was talking about audio recording, and he really was pushing that everyone should take an audio recorder with them when they're out there, because then if something does happen, you don't just have a story, you have it recorded. And that hit home with me, and just the idea of actually recording stuff out in the woods when no one's around, I was really attracted to doing something like that. So I, of course, got on the BFRO and I started checking out reports um, around my area and actually down around where me and Jameson had our experience. And it's funny, I went back to that campsite a year later and the county had gone through and just cleared everything. I mean, all that thick brush, I mean, it was just gone. There, if something was using that campground and trying to stay hidden, there's no reason they'd use that campground anymore because all that thick cover brush was just gone. So I kind of I'd planned on looking for areas around there to maybe start recording, but it was kind of far from my house too. And I remember I was coming home from a drive around the Wind River area, and I'd gone up through the mountains. I was coming out on the south side of St. Helens, and I'd stopped at an overlook, and I was taking a picture with the sunset and St. Helens there, and I was like, "You dummy! You know exactly where the elk are wintering up near your house. That's where you need to start recording." Because as far as I was concerned, if these guys are out there, they're going to be following a food source, and when we have large herds of elks that winter in the Toutle River Valley, so I decided to go down there where I'd gone shed hunting in the past, and it was that just happened. There was a BFRO report from 2009 that David Ellis had done at one of the lookouts on the North Fork of the Toutle, where it was a sighting report, and that just happened to be about less than 2 or 3 miles from where I decided to start recording. And so I just went in there and I started throwing an audio recorder out every week. And I was using a Tascam, and I got the Tascams with an extra battery pack. I could get 3 days and 2 nights. And so I'd go up, and me and one of my buddies and my son, we would hike around, look for tracks, evidence of some kind, of anything. And then we'd leave out recorders. And sure enough, it was within a month and a half or so, I got my first power knock. And at that same time, I signed up for an Olympic Project expedition. We don't do those anymore, but at the time, Derek was putting on expeditions to help pay for game cameras.
So, Chris, I'm going to pause you real quick. Sorry. So, Derek Randalls and then Shane Corson, just for the audience. Everyone probably knows who they are, but just in case.
And so I had signed up for an expedition with them, and I went and I met David, and I met Shane and Derek and everybody in person. And me and David exchanged contact information, and he was more than willing to help me out with what I was doing. And, in 2015, I started capturing some good vocalizations. Whistles were one of the first things I captured. I actually heard those in person. And it got to the point where I realized that some of the activity was basically happening because I was going in there on a very regular basis. And I recorded there till about 2019, and then.
So you think they were reacting to you being in there?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was an area that they definitely were passing through on a regular basis in the first place. But as soon as I started going in there on a regular basis, I became an interest. I think a lot of times we are the catalyst for some of the activity that they create, because what's this guy doing? No one else is. People don't usually come in here, and people go in there. I had game cameras out, and I'd get other shed hunters in the spring and mushroom pickers and stuff, but I was going in there every week for years, and so I was an anomaly basically. And it got to the point where I actually have one recording. I was just thinking of the other day. It's pretty cool. Something walked in and was breathing over the top of my recorder. It wasn't sniffing like a bear. I've got elk belching over my recorder where they're feeding around it, and other animals, but something stealthily. I mean, it walked in, you could barely hear it walk in really quietly. And at the time, I would put my recorder on old growth stumps because it used to be an old cedar and white pine forest. It's all Doug fir now. But these stumps are around there, and they're just massive. And I would put my recorder up in the middle of those, and that would put my recorder about 6 to 7 feet up in the air. Well, whatever this was, walked into the stump very quietly. You could barely tell something was walking up to it. And then you hear the mics kind of get muffled because they're the ambient noise around it is being blocked out, and then you just hear this breathing, and it sits there for 3 minutes breathing and turning its head, and then it slowly walks away very quietly. And so
That's so weird. It's almost like back in the day when you would make like prank phone calls and you would be like,
it was, yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
creepy. It's one of my favorites, but I've actually I've had stuff thrown at the recorder where it's definitely, you hear a rock going through branches and just whack the tree right next to the recorder, and stuff like that started happening. So they were very much, I became aware that they were aware of my audio recorders out there.
So, hey, Chris, can you tell everybody about what the Olympic Project is? Because you mentioned that was something that you got involved with, as well as the BFRO.
Yeah, so I was using the BFRO public website, but I was really attracted to the Olympic Project just based on the personalities I was hearing talking on podcasts. They're science-based, looking for actual evidence. And Derek Randall's originally started the project with Rich Dermot as a camera trap project up in the Olympics, and they had I don't know how many exactly, but 20 to 30 cameras out. And like I said, he would put on an expedition once in a while to get money for new cameras, batteries, and such. And so I went on that expedition, and when I met all of them, we're all like-minded. We enjoy the woods. We enjoy being out hiking. I like the idea of, we're out there for Sasquatch, but we're also out there to enjoy nature and learn. Shane's a learner, Derek's a learner. We're all avidly trying to learn about our natural environment. And I think the more you know about an area, the more you're going to find out about our target subjects. And so that just attracted me completely. And, around me and Shane hit it off. We became friends, and we actually went on some camping trips after that expedition. We started talking a lot on the phone, our thoughts and hypotheses about what we were encountering. And around 2017, he invited me to go out into the nest area, and basically, I didn't know it at the time, but I guess that meant I was a member. and
welcome. Right.
And
we're gonna you have to share it with the nest areas too when you're finished with it.
Yeah. So I think it was around 2019 or something. Shane referred to me as one of the members of the OP, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm a member. We're all friends. We were hanging out anyway, so it was cool. But yeah, so the nest area was a situation where in 2015, a timber cruiser, a guy who works for a timber company, was out on the timberland, and he was marking off with tape the boundary where they could log to. So in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of our streams and creeks are salmon bearing. Well, you get salmon runs and steelhead runs up them. So the logging companies, they can only log to a certain point, but they have to leave foliage and trees by the creeks. Well, that's what this guy was doing. And he came upon these large ground nests, and this guy had been doing it for 20 some odd years and had never seen anything like it. It actually, it scared him. And it just happened that he knew Derek through other business dealings and contacted Derek. They got the owner of the company involved, and they got a hold of DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and some bear biologists, and they took him out there, and everyone was like, we don't know what these are. These are not bear. If they are bear, no one's ever seen anything like it. And they're just large nests constructed, of huckleberry branches, because this area, you have the timber, and then the understory is just all huckleberry. And whatever had created these nests had broken all these branches off and transported this broken huckleberry and formulated it into a nest. And some of the branches were actually stuck in the ground. You had larger branches near the bottom, and then you had lighter, smaller branches at the top, and created a mattress of sort. And anyway, so that was in 2015 when that was discovered. And then, since then, Shane's taken some primatologists out, and And Derek, actually, he's the one who, he was researching these nests, looking for anything that could possibly make it. And he couldn't find anything in North America that was similar, but he did see that gorillas make a very similar nest, style of nest. And so, it's very primate-like. And like I said, this is material that's been broken off and transported, from maybe 30 yards away. And bears don't do that. Bears will get up next to a tree. They might scrape up a pile of duff, or they'll get to a tree and scrape down the bark, and they'll create a very circular nest. And actually, a big bear does not really make a giant. It doesn't. It's not even a nest. It's a bed. It's almost perfectly circular. I find bear beds all the time, and they're almost perfectly round. These were like bathtub, almost oval shape. Some of them were more circular than others. The largest one was 8 foot by 5 foot. Most of them were about 6 foot by 5 foot, and there was a couple smaller. So whatever was doing this was not doing something that ever had been seen before.
And what'd you find in a nest? Like anything else that out of the ordinary besides the branches and the huckleberry?
Shane collected a lot of hair that Dr. Meldrum's looked at, and Cindy Dosen from Homini Enigma up in Canada. And these hairs, they're unknown primate. They don't match any known primate. So there's a ton of hair. Shane's got a ton of hair from the nest. We also, one of the nests, we call it a point nest. That's the other thing. These nests were created strategically. It was almost a V-shaped pattern. You had a wall of huckleberry. You couldn't see them from above, and then you couldn't see them from below. There's a straight drop off to this salmon-bearing creek. And the point nest had 2 softball-sized rocks next to it that obviously had been banged together. They had score marks on them right next to this one nest. So that was interesting. But I mean, Shane talks about it, has talked about it a lot. But in order to find these nests, you basically have to walk right into them. That's why it was a timber cruiser that found them, because you couldn't see them from above. It was just a wall of huckleberry from above. And then if you were in the creek bottom looking up, you wouldn't be able to see it because it's just a steep incline. But once you got in, I mean, it was just total huckleberry destruction in all these nests. And every one of these nests were in a position where they could see each other through the huckleberry branches. There was one nest above the rest. There were 7 nests in the original find. And one nest above where the branches to the huckleberry over the top of it were broken, and you could sit in that nest, and that individual could look at every other nest below it and see every one of those nests. So it's very...
That's so interesting.
And they found a second nest site too. We talked about that on another show.
Wow.
But yeah.
That's so interesting.
In 2020, Shane and Todd Hale walked in on one that was in the process of being built. And someone was down there when they walked in on it. And they end up casting a number of 14-inch tracks and a hand impression. So
it's crazy.
That was 2020.
That is crazy.
But also what you're doing, you're out there a lot. I mean, how often are you out in the woods, up in that area?
For the last couple of years, at least twice a month. Basically, because I started an audio project in 2021, and basically recording every single night, and then logging every sound from sunset to sunrise. And I actually, yesterday, I just finished the spreadsheet on that, and I'll back up. So in 2021, 2020, actually, after Shane and Todd had found this new nest, Shane had asked me to come up with some of my I call them LTRs. A lot of people call them LDRs, long duration recorders or long-term recorders. They're homemade units where you can record, multiple nights, because the recorders have a time record function on them and extended battery packs. And I had mine at the time. My homemade jobs can, do 20 to 30 nights. And so Shane had asked me to start recording up there just to see what happens. And Wes Liam from the Squatcher Matrix, who's does a lot of statistical analysis. Me and him were talking, and he's like, it'd be cool as if we logged, all the owls. Yeah. And I'm like, well, let's just log everything. And so we kind of just brainstormed this idea. So I basically I had 3 recorders out there, and I started recording every night and logging every sound, every known animal sound, as well as possible unknowns. And it just turned into this giant monster. And so I basically type in the spreadsheet, date, location, time, and then what species and what kind of sound was made. And there are what we call unknown sounds we suspect are Sasquatch. And then I have another category, ambiguous, where it's usually distant stuff, but I can't make a judgment call on it. It might be our target subjects, but I can't say for sure. So we have these heading of unknowns and ambiguous sounds that includes a lot of percussives and vocalizations in that spreadsheet. And like I said, I just finished up with it. I recorded 60% of 2021, and then 2022 I captured every single night, and then I recorded up through March of this year. So we have basically a complete 2 years of data to look at now. And so in the future, I mean, Wes put out a light report for 2021 last year. You can find that on the OP website, and on Squatcher Matrix on Facebook, he has it there. And we're going to be doing a more in-depth report. There'll probably be a number of different reports, because we can actually look at individual nights, which is really cool, because I had 3 recorders out, and I started using professional recorders and SM4s. I have 2 of those. And the SM4 is made by Wildlife Bioacoustics for actual biologists. I mean, you go to their website, when you purchase one of these things, you can fill out grant forms, because most of the people buying these things are getting grant money for actual studies. And, I know some wildlife biologists here in the Northwest are using them to track barred owls on the Oregon Coast Range. But what's really interesting, and what I try to get out there for people, because a lot of people poo-poo audio, which I think is a mistake. There's a primatologist in France. I listened in on one of their webinars, who is using the SM4 to track bonobos, and bonobo chimps avoid game cameras like the plague. And she flat out said it's easier to track their movements using these SM4 sound recorders than it is to use game cameras. So it's an example of actual scientists doing exactly what I'm doing, except they're doing it for known animals. I'm doing it for an unknown. So,
but you all can use that data obviously you're going to continue. It's going to change and evolve, but you'll be able to use all that data to impact where you guys are out there looking for these target individuals.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about this project. Before we started, it was always assumed that the target subjects were only in the area in the months of February through May, because we believe that, based upon the age, and we've done a lot of experiments, or Shane and Derek have done a lot of experiments with creating nests themselves and watching them deteriorate, and just watching the original nests, how they deteriorated. Those nests were probably made in February, and they were found in May. So going into my audio project, we just assumed they were there just during those months. It also coincided with some of the salmon runs on that creek. But what we found with the audio project, there's a presence in that area pretty much year round. They're not living right there, but they're passing through on a very regular basis. I think the longest period of time where I haven't gotten a suspect sound, which when I say suspect sound, it's usually percussive and vocalizations. The longest period of time I've gone without that is maybe a week and a half. And that's in the dead of winter, in December and January, when there's snow. We had a lot of snow up there this year. But generally throughout the year, there's a presence, and at a minimum and 2. I lean towards there's being 3 individuals that are actually using that area on a regular basis, passing through it. And we have ideas where other areas that are nearby that they're utilizing too.
And that's
So,
based on the vocals. You didn't think
yeah.
there's 3?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, what would you say, like, what kind of sounds are you hearing? What kind of vocalizations are you hearing? Is it like, I remember you said whistling, and have you gotten any chatter?
I've gotten one instance where it's very strange and actually similar to Sierra sound chatter. But you have to remember those kind of vocalizations are close up. That's for close communication. And generally speaking, our recorders are out there. We're not going to get close vocalizations. Most of the vocalizations we're going to pick up are going to be for long distance communicating.
Okay.
But I've got one instance where I've gotten something very similar. A lot of everything's primate like, a lot of whoops, screams, yells. I've gotten the sing song, which we've talked about. It's been talked about on other podcasts and stuff, but it's kind of like singing. I call them high-low vocalizations. And those have been recorded all over the US. Whistles and a lot of knocks, tree pushovers. I've actually got a tree pushover with someone screaming as they do it. But everything, probably one of the most profound pieces of audio I recorded was very soon into the project. It was May of 2021, May 1st. And it's one that people want to check it out. It's on my YouTube. I break it down and I do a comparison with some chimpanzee sounds, but I call it chimp fit because that's what it sounds like. Essentially, that day, Rebecca, Shane and I had gone in to service the audio and some game cameras. And we were down in the original nest area. We call it Nest Area 1. And while we were down there, I was on the ground messing with my recorder. I was ticked off about something. And there's a very, I'm always ticked off about something because technology, I have a love-hate relationship with. But I was messing with my recorder, and Shane and Rebecca, they're looking down in the ravine. And they're like, do you hear that? I hear that. There's someone down there. And Shane's like, no one could be down there because, mind you, the nest area is behind locked gates, 2 miles behind the locked gates. Yes, people could hike in there, but why would they? And down in the ravines themselves, it's so thick down there. There's no reason someone would be down in that location. And it was coming up down by the creek out of the ravine area. And they were hearing mumbling or something. And I was kind of vaguely listening to him. I finally finished what I was doing and got the recorder set up, and I stand up and I go, what are you guys hearing? And right as I stand up, from not from the ravine area, but someone up closer to us, whoop, does that. And it's very close. And Shane's like, what the heck? You know, and we're both, Shane's like, oh, that's got to be pickers or something.
Did he use the word heck, or was it something else that came out of his mouth?
No. But we're like, it's not people. That's weird. So we left, and since then we've had in multiple occasions where we've heard vocalizations around us. So, anyways, we left. Well, you know, a month goes by. I come back out. I get the recorder, and I finally review that day. Well, that night, so that was about 10, a little after 10 in the morning when that occurred. That night, 12 hours later, at 10:08 p.m., same exact vocal we heard in person. I have that vocal recorded too, because I always have a recorder going on my head when we're out there. Same exact vocal occurs at 10:08 p.m. And about a minute later, there's an escalation of whoops into screams, and then some pant hoots, very deep pant hoots after the second scream. And if you look, and I analyze everything visually. It's visually first and then ears second. If you look at this sound clip of it's 30 seconds and you break it down, these whoops that escalate into these screams visually look a lot like when chimpanzees get excited when they see someone they recognize who's generally bringing them food. On my YouTube channel. You can go, I break it down, you can go look at it, but I visually put up chimpanzee pant hoots in comparison to our whoops, and then chimpanzee screams in comparison to our screams. They're not identical, but oh my gosh, they're so similar. It's beyond me how no one could be interested in it, because we don't have chimpanzees in the Northwest. And that's the type of
Well, North
audio.
America in general, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless they're in a zoo.
That, you know, stuff like that is why I do this, because you can't explain that away. You can't say, well, that's just a distant coyote or a distant owl that you're misinterpreting. And that's my biggest beef. People think, well, you're just misinterpreting this stuff. No, I'm not. I've been doing this a long time. I've looked at over 30,000 hours worth of audio now in spectrogram. And I know the difference between canine. I know the difference between owls and avian. I've seen pretty much everything that exists in Washington State. I've seen it in a spectrogram. So when something else shows up like this, that's obviously primate, it should get other people's attention.
So here's a quick question.
There's my soapbox. Sorry.
No, we love it.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting question. So why do you think that, in general, wild primates are avoid cameras and not so much an audio device?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I've always thought, well, that camera lens looks an awful lot like an eyeball to me. And as primates, we do not make eye contact. I mean, one of the worst things you can do is make eye contact with a chimpanzee or a gorilla, wild ones in the field. You don't make eye contact. Even with human beings, you look at how we behave around each other. You know, when you look at a guy in the eye, you're asserting yourself. And it's the same way with primates. And I that's just my own hypothesis. I mean, who knows? I think whatever we're dealing with out there, they've evolved to avoid us. That's what's made them successful at surviving. And that's however that process has worked. I think they tend to avoid stuff that we put out there. And I think they get close to game cameras. I think they see them and they just don't trigger them. I think 9 times out of 10, they don't get close enough to trigger those things. And there are game cameras photos out there. Shane got a real compelling video, I think in 2017 or 18, where you just see 2 legs go by his game camera that he had on the side of his trailer, and he was camped out on the fringes of the nest area. His wife had woken up and said something was messing with her cooler. Well, when he checked his game camera, it's so big you can't really, it kind of, the night flash kind of whites it out, but they look like they have hair on them. And I played with the exposure on them, and you can see where they're large. And when Shane walked by it himself, whatever it was 4 times the size of Shane. And so it's not that game cameras don't work. I just think they don't get triggered. They're not put in the right places. And I think they just avoid them. I mean, for whatever reason, I think when they see them, they see that lens. I think they see that as an eyeball, maybe.
Plus audio,
my thought.
Chris, you figure your audio is running all the time. And you have a timer set, so from nighttime to whenever, so it's constantly running, so there's no trigger, and it's picking up 300, what's that, 380, 360 degrees. I'm like, wait a minute, my math is horrible here. But so it's picking up a bigger area versus a game camera.
And also, I mean, I don't personally know this, but just from interviewing others and listening to other things about trying to get video footage, I mean, some say that these cameras emit like a sound.
Yeah, some of them are very noisy. I mean, some of them, I have some cameras that I can hear them when they go off.
Okay.
And and a lot of the cameras, we get no glow cameras which don't have a visible flash. But most of the cameras, the IR, it's a red light. You can see it when they go off. You see it, like daytime in the woods. But what's funny is like my SM4s, they're kind of box, like they look like a game camera. They just don't have a lens on them. They just have mics coming out of them. And I put them up on trees, and I haven't tried to hide them. Generally with all my audio, if I'm hiding it from people. But I have examples of stuff being thrown. You hear whatever the object is that's thrown, whether it's rocks. I'm pretty sure some of the stuff that's been thrown is rocks and some is branches or whatever, but you hear it hitting leaves and then making contact with either the tree the recorder's on or a tree next to it and then crashing to the ground. And so that I know they're seeing that and they're trying to get a reaction out of it. To me, that's them trying to see if that thing will do anything. Maybe it'll make that flashlight. I don't know how many times I've had game camera pictures where just some nights it's just set off and there's nothing there over and over. And that's the other thing. Just recently, Shane got some great bear videos. And some of those videos, all you're getting is the 20-second videos, but you're just getting the butt end of the bear as it leaves the picture. And so I think sometimes the cameras themselves are too slow. The cameras go off after whoever set the trigger off has already passed by.
Yeah, so unless they're just hanging out in front of the camera, if they're walking by it, they could, by the time it triggers, I guess it could, it just catches literally the tail end.
Right. Hey, so. and since we're running out of time, we don't want to forget mentioning,
so,
how you recently joined another organization. Did you want to ask?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, what's interesting in this community is, we talk about collaboration or sometimes lack of collaboration. And in my book, I mentioned that I think there's more collaboration going on than people think. And, but it's rare to have, the Olympic Project team is one of the most well-respected teams out there. And then Chris obviously is involved with Project Zoobook, but then Chris recently joined another organization, which doesn't normally happen when, another organization lets you be part of them when you're already part of another one, if that's making sense. So Chris, spill the beans. What's going on?
Yeah. So I'm a member of the NAWAC now. I joined back in February, and it was basically, it's another group that I've followed them for a long time. And when Mike Mays put out his book last year, I PM'd him a couple times and we started kind of a conversation. And, his book, I have a lot of pages folded because I'm like, oh, they're describing this kind of vocal. Oh, they're describing this kind of vocal. So I was really interested in that because they're getting some of the same behaviors we're seeing up here. And Mike was really excited about, collaborating because, it would be really cool when a group down in Southeast Oklahoma gets a particular behavior documented, and then we're documenting the same behavior up here in the Northwest. And so, I went down for the training in March, and I met everybody in person. Well, not everybody. I met the majority of the people in person, and it's a big group, and I just really loved it. I mean, everybody down there is just like-minded. Felt like, overwhelmingly welcoming, and we talked about Sasquatch. I had a great time, and I've been in contact with other members now because we have a forum and we can throw out our hypothesis and bounce ideas off each other. And some of the stuff I've learned from the NAWAC, I'm applying now up in the Nest area. And if as far as I'm concerned, I don't care who gets the good picture or brings forward evidence that's going to prove these things to science to take it seriously. I don't care who does it. I'm all about helping anybody out to do it. And, we're trying to get good photographic evidence and thermal images ourselves. And that's what they're focusing on as well. And why not brainstorm together?
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, the collaboration, just what you guys can help each other out. And obviously we've had Mike Mays on the show, and Daryl Collier and Matt Pruitt and those folks. And I was not down there with you when you had that, your introduction in person and to the team.
Yeah.
But that's just so amazing, so cool. So thanks for sharing that. And I know you're gonna bring so much to them and vice versa. So
yeah. So hey, Chris, since we're kind of like wrapping things up here, we're at the end of our show. Can you share with everybody how they can follow you and what you're doing?
I have a YouTube account. It's Chris Spencer, Tootle River Valley Skookum. I picked out that name a long time ago. Wasn't no thought to making something easy for people to follow, but I try to put up I put up a lot of known animal stuff because luckily I've had help from Monongahela and David Ellis in what I'm doing, but a lot of stuff I've had to learn myself through trial and error and getting to know. I just getting out there and recording in the same area for a long period of time is how you get to know the known animals. And so if I can help other people understand what they're recording, which I do as much as possible, I'll put it up, so I got a lot of known animals on my website, or my YouTube, but I also have some unknown stuff, and I try to put only stuff up that's profound enough to me that it's worthy, all primate like, and stuff that really can't be mistaken for, coyotes or owls, because 9 times out of 10, most the stuff perpetuated on YouTube as Sasquatch is coyotes or owl. Coyotes, I struggle with coyotes still. Sometimes you gotta look at the signatures. It's all about the visual look in the spectrogram, because coyotes make a crazy range of sounds, and it's also getting to know the character of how they do their sounds. Like our target subjects, they don't make a lot of noise, and there'll be a quick instance where they'll make noise and then it goes quiet and you probably won't get anything the rest of the night. If you get one instance of vocalization in a night, that's about what you're going to get. They very rarely go on and on and on, whereas coyotes, usually you're going to get quite a few more vocals besides just one, but it does happen. So anyways,
so that's how our viewers can learn about what you're doing and all of these, because you have a lot of recordings there on your YouTube channel that they can go ahead and follow. Are you on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram?
I'm on Facebook too, and then of course when Wes starts doing his statistical analysis from our audio project, that'll be posted on the OP website. And I encourage anybody that hasn't seen the light report that he did for 2021 to go check that out on the Olympic Project website. There's some very interesting things that we found from 2021, and we're going to probably solidify some of those hypotheses for 2022. But it's, like I said, there's 2 years worth of data to go through. So over the coming years, we'll be releasing different tidbits of what we find.
So they can, if the audience types in Olympic Project, they can probably find the website.
Yeah,
and we'll have that all linked into the show notes as well.
Awesome.
So this is cool.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on, Chris. This was like a really super interesting interview with you. I love your approach to things, and I'm so excited that our viewers get to hear all about you and what you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me on. I mean,
yeah,
I like talking about Sasquatch, so.
Yeah, we do too.
We appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. We'll talk soon.
No problem.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Chris,
that was so cool.
Yeah, and obviously we've had David Ellis on the show. And if you guys, when you check out the book, the Bigfoot Influencers book that I wrote, I've got Shane Corson was nice enough to give me some photos that you can find in the book, and you can click the QR code and it has a link to color images of it, as well as there's a, I'm not sure if it's the same document that Chris was talking about, but he gave me basically some data, a presentation that he said we can share. So you get to see that as well. It's just some really cool. And then Wes from Squatchermetrics was part of the book, helped out with some real, these guys are amazing. Chris is amazing. I'm so glad we had him on the show.
Yeah. Audio is so important.
Yeah.
And it's so good for everybody to learn about how much evidence you can collect from audio. So we really appreciate Chris being on today. And we're so sad, but we have to go, guys. But we're so glad that you joined us, and we promise we're going to be a little bit better about putting out a weekly show. So
we appreciate you guys.
Yep. Don't forget to follow us. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, the Bigfoot Influencers. We also have a website, and you can also order Tim's book to learn about all of the people in the Bigfoot world and what they're doing.
And Chris will be the next one.
Yay.
So
awesome.
Thank you guys.
See ya.